You buy a box of chocolates for someone you love. You choose them carefully. You think about what they like. The dark ones, the soft centers, the ones with the cream inside. You pay for them, you carry them home, and you place them on the table, and you watch the person you care about reach into the box and eat one. Now imagine that someone has already opened that box. Someone has already held each chocolate in her hand, pierced it with a needle, injected it with strychnine, and returned it to the shop. Imagine that the person behind the counter has no idea. Imagine that the person you love eats the chocolate, smiles, and within 30 minutes is convulsing on the floor. Imagine that this is not happening once. It is happening across an entire town, for months. Chocolate after chocolate, parcel after parcel, victim after victim. And no one can work out who is doing it because the person responsible is a well-dressed, well-spoken 42-year-old spinster who lives in a grand terraced house on Gloucester Place, and who has, by all appearances, never done a remarkable thing in her life. Her name was Christiana Edmunds. The press would call her the chocolate cream poisoner. And the story of what she did to the town of Brighton in the summer of 1871 is not a story about poison, or about chocolate, or even about murder. It is a story about obsession. The kind that does not burn out but burns inward, until the person consumed by it can no longer tell the difference between love and annihilation. Welcome to the Crimson Files. If you are new here, we walk into the rooms that history locked and left in the dark, because what happened in those rooms matters. It mattered then, and it matters now. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Let me take you to Brighton. Not the Brighton you know. Not the Brighton of hen parties and fish and chips on the pier and students stumbling home along the seafront at 2 in the morning. The Brighton of 1870 was something else entirely. It was the most fashionable seaside resort in England, a town built on pleasure, on spectacle, on the illusion that life could be lighter here than it was in London 40 miles to the north. The Royal Pavilion gleamed at its center like a hallucination. The promenades were thick with parasols and top hats. The air smelled of salt and money. Gloucester Place sat just back from the seafront, a terrace of tall, cream-colored houses with iron railings and long sash windows, respectable and handsome and utterly unremarkable. Number 16 belonged to the Edmunds family. Christiana lived there with her widowed mother, Anne. Across the road on Grand Parade stood the surgery of Dr. Charles Beard. That proximity, that short walk across the street, is where everything begins. Christiana Edmunds was born on the 3rd of October, 1828 in Margate, Kent. Her father, William Edmunds, was a successful architect. He designed Holy Trinity Church in Margate. He designed the lighthouse at the end of the pier. He was a man of standing, of reputation, of substance. Her mother, Anne Christiana Byrne, came from a military family. Her father had been a captain in the Royal Marines. This was a comfortable, educated, solidly middle-class household. Christiana was privately schooled. She returned home to live as what the Victorians called a lady of fortune, a woman of independent means with no need to work. But the Edmunds household carried a secret, and it was not a small one. William Edmunds, the successful architect, the designer of churches and lighthouses, went mad. There is no gentler way to put it. In the early 1840s, he was diagnosed with acute mania. He was violent. He was restless. He talked incessantly of things that were not real. He believed he was worth millions of pounds. He was sent to a private asylum where he spent nearly a year. He improved enough to come home, but in March 1845 he was committed to Peckham House Lunatic Asylum in London. He never left. He died there in March 1847 at the age of 47. Christiana was 18 when her father died in a madhouse. Her brother, whose name the records do not always preserve, was epileptic and prone to violent episodes. He was sent to Earlswood Asylum, an institution for what the Victorians called idiots and imbeciles. He died there. Her sister was diagnosed with hysteria. She killed herself at the age of 36. Of the Edmunds children, only Christiana remained. She and her mother moved to Brighton in the 1860s. Christiana was by then in her late 30s, unmarried, childless, living quietly with a woman who had buried a husband in a lunatic asylum and lost 2 of her 3 surviving children to madness and suicide. Whatever private grief the 2 women carried, they carried it behind the long sash windows of Gloucester Place, where the sea breeze stirred the curtains and the world outside looked And then Christiana met Dr. Charles Beard. The nature of their relationship has been debated for over 150 years, and no source agrees with any other. What is known is this: Christiana became Beard's patient. Their acquaintance deepened. Letters were exchanged. Passionate letters, at least on her side, whether the relationship was ever physical, whether Beard reciprocated her feelings or merely tolerated them, whether he was complicit or simply careless. These are questions that the trial would later attempt to answer and fail. What is not disputed is that by the middle of 1869, Christiana Edmunds was in love with Dr. Charles Beard. Deeply, consumingly, irrationally in love. And Dr. Charles Beard was married. His wife's name was Emily. For approximately a year, whatever existed between Christiana and the doctor continued. Meetings, letters, consultations that lasted longer than they should have. But by the summer of 1870, Beard wanted out. He told Christiana to stop writing to him. He told her the relationship, whatever it was over. Christiana did not stop. In September 1870, she called at the Beard home on Grand Parade. She brought with her a gift for Emily, a box of chocolate creams. Mrs. Beard ate one. It tasted bitter. She described it later as very disagreeable. Within hours, she was violently ill, vomiting, retching, her body convulsing in the particular way that strychnine forces a human body to convulse. She survived. Dr. Beard looked at his wife. He looked at the chocolates. He thought of Christiana Edmunds, and he knew, or at the very least he strongly suspected, what had happened. But he said nothing, not to the police, not to anyone outside his household. Because to accuse Christiana was to invite a scandal. To invite a scandal was to invite questions about the nature of his relationship with her, and those questions in the closed and gossiping world of Victorian Brighton would destroy him. He told Christiana that he knew. He told her to stay away from his family. He banished her from his home. And that should have been the end of it. It was not the end of it. What happened next is the part of this story that separates Christiana Edmunds from every other poisoner in the Victorian catalogue. Because she did not stop. She did not retreat. She did not accept the rejection and nurse her wound in private. Instead, she devised a plan of such elaborate, reckless, and ultimately senseless cruelty that it is difficult to know whether it constitutes criminal genius or criminal madness. And the courts of England spent months trying to decide. Her reasoning, and if it can be called reasoning, appears to have been this. If she could make it look as though the chocolate that had poisoned Emily Beard had come from a contaminated batch at a local shop, then the poisoning would be blamed on the shopkeeper, not on her. She would be exonerated. And if she was exonerated, perhaps Dr. Beard would take her back. The shop she chose was J.G. Maynard's, a well-known confectioner at 41 to 42 West Street in Brighton. Maynard sold chocolate creams, the same kind she had given to Emily Beard. Beginning in early 1871, Christiana began buying chocolate creams from Maynard's. She took them home to Gloucester Place. She injected them with strychnine, a white, odorless, intensely bitter crystalline powder. lethal in even small doses which she obtained from a local chemist named Isaac Garrett on the pretext that she needed it to poison stray cats that were ruining her garden. She then returned the chocolates to Maynard's shop, claiming they were the wrong size or the wrong kind, and asked for them to be exchanged. The poisoned chocolates went back into the shop's stock. They were sold to ordinary customers, strangers, families, children. When her frequent purchases began to attract attention, she adapted. She started paying young boys, street children, errand runners, to go into Maynard's and buy the chocolates for her. One of these boys, Adam May, would later become a key witness at her trial. She also sent boys to the chemist with forged prescriptions to collect more strychnine, so that her own name would not appear in the poison register too often. She was methodical, she was patient, she was relentless, and she was poisoning an entire town. Tell me, what do you think was happening inside her mind? Was this calculation or compulsion? Was she trying to win back a man, or had the plan taken on a life of its own beyond any rational motive? I want to hear your theory in the comments. This is a case that still divides opinion, and I want to know where you stand. Throughout the spring of 1871, people in Brighton were falling ill. Stomach cramps, vomiting, the violent arching convulsions that are the signature of strychnine. But no one connected the illnesses to the chocolates. The victims were scattered, different streets, different households, different days. There was no pattern until the 12th of June, 1871. A man named Charles Miller was on holiday in Brighton with his brother's family. He walked into Maynard's shop on West Street and bought a bag of chocolate creams. He ate a few. He gave one to his 4-year-old nephew. The boy's name was Sidney Albert Barker. Within 30 minutes, Sidney was in agony. The strychnine seized his small body in waves of uncontrollable spasm, the jaw locking, the back arching, the limbs rigid. There is no gentle way to describe what strychnine does to a child. It is not like falling asleep. It is not like anything a 4-year-old should ever experience. Sidney Albert Barker died that day. His uncle, Charles Miller, was also taken violently ill, but survived. An inquest was held. The Brighton coroner, David Black, examined the evidence. Strychnine was found in the remaining chocolates from Maynard's, but no one could explain how it got there. John Maynard, the shopkeeper, was a reputable man. There was no evidence that he had deliberately introduced the poison. The coroner ruled Sidney's death accidental. And here is where Christiana Edmunds revealed herself, though no one yet knew it. She appeared at the inquest as a witness. She testified calmly that she and her friends had also been made ill by chocolates from Maynard's. She was helpful. She was concerned. She was placing herself inside the investigation, not as a suspect, but as a victim. Then she went further. She wrote 3 anonymous letters to Sidney Barker's grieving father. The first was signed an old inhabitant and a seeker of justice. The second was signed with the initials CGB, Dr. Charles Beard's initials. The third was from a London tradesman, now a visitor at Brighton. All 3 urged Mr. Barker to sue John Maynard. One went so far as to suggest that if the father did not take action, he would be a negligent parent and an accomplice to any future poisonings. She was taunting a man whose 4-year-old son she had killed. She was using the initials of the man she loved to frame someone else. And she did not stop. The poisonings continued through the summer. More chocolates, more illness. But now she expanded her repertoire. On the 10th of August, 1871, 6 prominent Brighton residents received anonymous parcels through the post. Inside were fruit and cakes, laced with arsenic. One parcel was addressed to Mrs. Emily Beard. Another was addressed to Christiana Edmunds herself. Emily Beard's servants tasted the plum cake that arrived and declared it dangerous. Two of them became violently ill, and Dr. Charles Beard, who had kept his silence for nearly a year, who had watched the poisoning spread across Brighton without saying a word, who had protected his reputation at the cost of an entire town's safety, finally went to the police. He handed over Christiana's letters. He voiced his suspicions. He told them everything. Christiana Edmunds was arrested. The police searched her home. They matched her handwriting to the anonymous letters sent to Mr. Barker and to the addresses on the poisoned parcels. They found that she had purchased both strychnine and arsenic. They found Adam May, the boy she had paid to buy chocolates and collect poisons on her behalf. The case was overwhelming. She was initially charged with the attempted murder of Emily Beard and Mrs. Boys, another Brighton resident who had been poisoned. But when the full scale of her campaign became clear, when the death of Sidney Barker was connected to the same chain of poisoned chocolates, the charge was changed to murder. In Victorian England, murder carried the death penalty, and it was standard practice to try the most serious charge alone. The committal hearings were held in Brighton, but the public feeling against Christiana was so intense that a fair trial was deemed impossible in the town she had terrorized. The case was transferred to the Central Criminal Court in London, the Old Bailey. The trial opened on the 15th of January, 1872. Christiana appeared in the dock dressed in black velvet with a fur trim. She was described by the press as tall, handsome, and extremely prepossessing of demeanor. One journalist from the Daily News noted something specific about her face. Christiana Edmunds has a way of compressing the lips occasionally, when the left side of the mouth twists up with a sardonic, defiant determination in which there is something of a weird comeliness. She was 43 years old. She was on trial for the murder of a 4-year-old boy she had never met. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Christiana Edmunds had purchased strychnine. She had purchased chocolate creams. She had injected the one into the other and returned them to a shop where they were sold to the public. Sidney Barker had eaten one of those chocolates and died. The chain of evidence was unbroken. The defense did not deny the facts. Instead, it argued insanity. Christiana's barrister laid out the family history. The father who died in Peckham Lunatic Asylum, the brother who died in Earlswood Asylum, the sister who killed herself. He argued that Christiana was morally defective, that her moral sense had been destroyed, that she could not distinguish between right and wrong. Dr. Charles Beard took the stand. He testified that his relationship with Christiana had never been physical, that it was merely a series of letters she had written to him and some mild flirtations. The defense challenged this. They argued that the two had been involved in an affair and that the ending of that affair had been the trigger that sent Christiana into her spiral. Beard sat in the witness box and denied everything. Whether the jury believed him is another matter. The prosecution called medical witnesses. The defense called medical witnesses. The question was not whether Christiana had done it, everyone agreed she had, but whether she was sane enough to be held responsible. The jury deliberated for 1 hour. They returned a verdict of guilty. The judge placed the black cap on his head and sentenced Christiana Edmunds to death by hanging. And then Christiana spoke. She was asked, as was customary, whether she knew of any cause or condition that should prevent the sentence from being carried out. She replied that she was pregnant. It was a lie, but it was a lie with legal force. Under English law, a woman who was with child could not be executed until the baby was born. A jury of matrons, women drawn from the spectators in the courtroom, was assembled on the spot. They retired to an anteroom with a prison surgeon, Dr. Gibson, and examined Christiana. She was not pregnant. The sentence stood. Christiana was returned to her cell to await the hangman, but the hangman never came. While Christiana sat in the condemned cell, two doctors, Dr. William Orange, the medical superintendent of Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum, and a second Home Office physician, examined her. Their report was unequivocal. Christiana Edmunds was insane. Her feelings were confused and perverted to a most marked insane character. She was morally defective. She was incapable of understanding the nature of what she had done. The Home Secretary accepted the report. The death sentence was commuted. Christiana was not declared guilty with a life sentence substituted, which would have been the standard procedure. Instead, in a decision that remains legally unusual to this day, the Home Secretary effectively overturned the jury's verdict and declared her not guilty by reason of insanity. She was committed to Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum for indefinite detention. The decision was controversial. Many felt that Christiana's privileged background, her education, her class, her independent means, had bought her a reprieve that a poor woman would never have received. Others argued that the family history of madness was so overwhelming that hanging her would have been barbaric. On the 5th of July, 1872, Christiana Edmunds entered Broadmoor. She was 43 years old. She would never leave. She arrived wearing rouge on her cheeks and a large quantity of false hair arranged over her own. She had false teeth. Dr. Orange wrote on her admission notes simply, "She is very vain." And vanity, it turned out, was the one constant of her incarceration. Christiana Edmunds spent 35 years inside Broadmoor. She was generally quiet and manageable. She did embroidery. She played croquet. She mended asylum clothes. But she also caused trouble, provoking other patients into arguments, then complaining about their behavior. She smuggled in contraband through her sister. Extra clothes, cosmetics, additional false hair to fill out her wig. Dr. Orange noted that she deceived for the pure love of deception. She flirted with the male doctors and staff, relentlessly, brazenly, into her 70s. She demanded their attention. She preened and posed. Her manner and expression, one doctor recorded, were sexual and amatory. She never expressed remorse, not once. Not for Emily Beard, not for the dozens of strangers she had poisoned. Not for Sidney Albert Barker, the 4-year-old boy who had eaten a chocolate cream on a summer holiday and died in agony on the floor. She outlived every other member of her family. Her mother died. Her remaining sister died. There was no one left to visit, no one left to petition for her release, no one who wanted to. As she entered the last year of her life, nearly blind, barely able to walk, confined to the infirmary, a conversation between Christiana and another patient was recorded in her case notes. It was just before the annual New Year dance for female patients in 1906. How am I looking? Fairly well. Are my eyebrows all right? Yes, I think I am improving. I hope I shall be better in a fortnight. If so, I shall astonish them. I shall get up and dance. I was a Venus before, and I shall be a Venus again. 9 months later, on the 19th of September 1907, Christiana Edmunds died. She was 78 years old. Her cause of death was recorded as senile decay. She had been inside Broadmoor for 35 years. She had never stood on a Brighton street again. She had never seen the sea, and Sidney Barker never saw his 5th birthday. There is a particular cruelty in this case that sets it apart from the others in the archive. It is not the poison. It is not the scale. It is the randomness. Christiana Edmunds did not kill the people she wanted to kill. She killed a stranger's child, a boy on holiday, a boy reaching for a chocolate. Because killing strangers was part of a plan to disguise the murder she actually intended. She treated an entire town as collateral. She turned the simplest pleasure a parent can give a child, a sweet from a shop, into a loaded weapon. And she did it not in the grip of rage or poverty or desperation, but in the grip of something far more bewildering. A love that no one returned for a man who did not want her. In a world that had already taken everything from her family and left her alone in a grand house with nothing but time and obsession, and a chemist who sold strychnine to anyone who said she had cats. Maynard's sweet shop on West Street is long gone. Gloucester Place still stands in Brighton, though the houses have been renumbered and repurposed. The surgery on Grand Parade, where Dr. Charles Beard once practiced, is no longer a surgery. Broadmoor still operates deep in the Berkshire forest, though it has changed beyond recognition since the day Christiana arrived with her rouge and her false hair and her absolute certainty that she was the most beautiful woman in the room. There is no grave marker for Sidney Albert Barker that the public record preserves. A 4-year-old boy on holiday by the sea, who ate a chocolate and died. That is the sentence that his life was reduced to. And Christiana Edmunds, who put the strychnine in that chocolate, spent 35 years in an asylum playing croquet and flirting with doctors and asking whether her eyebrows were all right. I do not know what justice looks like in a case like this. I am not sure anyone does. This is their file. It remains in the archive. Thank you for being here. If this case unsettled you, if the image of a box of chocolates will never look quite the same, then subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me below. Do you think Christiana Edmunds was mad? Or do you think she was something else entirely? I want to know. This has been the Crimson Files. Stay curious, stay kind, and I will see you in the next one.